The ultimate goal of the Watchers, which is played out in what they actually do, is to dominate the earth. They set up these dynasties, and their offspring can rule the earth because they're human enough to inherit the birthright of Adam, which is dominion of planet Earth. A lot of the way that we think as Western Christians comes from medieval times. We think it's biblical, but it's not. It's traditional. The Bible does not inform us about anything and everything. The Bible has a very specific purpose. The most important and specific purpose of the Bible is to convey the gospel of Christ.
Because I think we had the ability, we just didn't have the coding.
The Watchers knew what they were giving to mankind. Whatever it was, knowledge and technology, was going to corrupt them.
All right, we're doing an impromptu discussion right here, fireside chat in Montana, talking about all the things blurry, all things strange, from ancient megaliths, giants, modern UFO sightings, Bigfoot. We have a whole discussion here. It's a fireside chat with Tim Alberino, and I'm half of Blurry Creatures, and we're going to get into it today. And about 15 minutes, we're going to hop over into another hour conversation with just members. And if you want to become a member, you can go to blurrycreatures.com, or you can also get this conversation at Tim's members community. Where at?
The AlberinoAnalysis.com.
Yeah. So join us for a long discussion, about a 2-hour episode.
You can find the link to those members communities in the description of this video. Hey guys, we got something special for you today. We are here in Montana. Myself, Nate, and we're recording a special members video here for the Blurry Creatures members audience and for the Alberino Analysis members community. And we're just going to have a little fireside chat here.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk about, Nate?
Get into it. I think we should let's go ancient history and giants, modern phenomena, weird stuff, and the future.
Let's do it.
What you like to talk about. So, over the years, we've had a lot of talks, Tim. We've gone all over the world talking.
Gone to Peru, that's right, Costa Rica.
Came to BlurryCon a couple times, and we've talked about a lot of things going down. I think we could kick it off with a just easy giant question. How's that? There's a lot of people talk about the Nephilim and the Rephaim. Is that just a linguistic shift, or are there two different beings?
I think generally speaking, Nephilim refers to the first generation of giants, primarily in the antediluvian world. And then you have successive generations that we encounter in the Old Testament post-flood.
Yeah.
You have, for example, the Anakim who come from the Nephilim.
Yeah.
So the Anakim are the descendants of the Nephilim. You have the Rephaim. So these are all tribes of giants that are ultimately descended from that first breed of hybrids. And of course, the giants were the product of the procreative product of the Watchers in human women. In the Greek version of the Book of Enoch, you have different races of giants that are named. You have the Eliud, the Nephilim, and so forth. Nephilim definitely refers to pre-flood giants, and whether or not they were called Nephilim afterward, probably were, but more often than not, you encounter the descendants of the Nephilim, and the Rephaim are descendants of the Nephilim.
Do you think they're genetically like a step down from them or different in some way?
I would say that probably the bloodline was becoming diluted as they were intermingling with the human species and becoming progressively smaller because of that delusion.
People talk about a lot on our show, like genetics. Speaking of that, could there be like a genetic marker that's still traceable today back to these giant clans in the human DNA, I think?
Probably. I mean, there has to be, right? Because if the giants were, think about Goliath of Gath, who David slew. He probably, I mean, not to be vulgar, but he probably slept with regular sized women at some point. He was probably reproducing, at least in adolescence. The giants in their adolescence, maybe when they were 14, 15, 16 years old, were not so large that they couldn't reproduce. And the tribes in Canaan, the Canaanites worshipped giants. The giants were the great heroes of old. And in some cases, there were necromantic practices related to giants, to communicating with dead giants. So there was a cult of giant worship in Canaan. And so you would I would assume, and I've never seen any proof of this, but I would assume that there is probably ritualistic sex magic involving giants to produce more generations of giants, to procreate them. So if you extrapolate that out, then at some point you would have some of those genetics of the Nephilim remaining in the human populace, but not expressing as in extraordinary size anymore.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some features that are spread out, diffused within the human populace today, some genetic markers that go back to the Nephilim.
And when you think of like the men of renown, do you think that all of them were obvious Nephilim, or do you think that some of them could have like blended in as like just incredibly intelligent humans that look like us, but we couldn't tell? Or were they very distinct, you think? Like they were a subset species that humans could worship in real time because they were so different than us?
There's a lot of different ideas about what the Nephilim look like. You've encountered, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
The Nephilim were clowns.
Yeah.
Is that? That's floating around out there.
Yeah.
You know, some people think that the Nephilim were reptilian or whatever. I don't see any indication that they looked all that different from us, although you do have 6 fingers coming up.
Yeah.
Double rows of teeth, red hair, and some of these other features. So you got a little bit Nephilim.
Yeah. Maybe.
I'm
asking these questions for a reason.
The real question to me, and really the only way to answer this question, is what did the Watchers look like?
Yeah.
That's the real question. So I'm persuaded that the Watchers look like us. In other words, we look like them.
So do you think that first generation could have been the most pristine? And then what happens if 2 like giant offspring mate? Does that create something different, you think, versus the original first?
No, if you had 2 first generation Nephilim breeding, you would get a pure blood Nephilim.
Yeah.
Well, not entirely, because you have something like 50%. So you would get a Nephilim with giant and some fallen angel DNA, but a lot of giant DNA. So yeah, who knows which genetic trademarks were lost, which ones come from the Watchers and which ones come from humans, and how that all plays out in the gene pool. But certainly I think the size would have been larger in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then gradually diminished as you get further away from the original stock. So a question I find intriguing is, did the Watchers know that the product of their procreation with human women would be giants, would result in extraordinarily large beings? Did they know that?
And is there anything in Enoch that suggests?
No. Did they intend it? I mean, there's things that we can intimate. For example, if the Watchers fully intended for their offspring to dominate the children of men, to take dominion of the earth, then it would make sense that they purposely made them larger. And how would they do that? Well, it could have been a not just procreation, not just sexual intercourse, but also incorporating some kind of technology, which we can do today, in order to perhaps change something in the genome to guarantee that their offspring would be exceptionally large. And again, why would they do that? So that they could dominate the human species.
So I think it was more like sort of premeditated, first degree rebellion.
I think it was totally premeditated. But remember, in the book of Enoch, the Watchers, they had 3 goals in mind. They had 3 primary goals.
Yeah.
The first 2 are explicit in the text. They lusted after human women.
Yeah.
So they wanted to copulate with human women. That's number 1. I call that the first cause of the Watchers' rebellion.
Because I think that's where it seems like that's where they mostly went wrong. I'm not sure if they actually knew the genetic repercussions of their decisions.
Well, they wanted to copulate.
Yeah.
They wanted to have sex with human women, but they wanted to marry these women and produce offspring. So the Watchers wanted to make families.
Yeah.
They wanted to produce families. So those are the 2 first motivations of the Watchers. They wanted to marry these women with the intention of having sex, but marry them. That's very important. And they wanted to produce offspring. So
do you think like them, because a lot of people on our show over the years have said that they're involved kind of when this creation is going down with humans. Do you think they know that their DNAs can mix?
Yes, they were genetically compatible. So you have those 2 explicit motives of the Watchers, and you have an implicit motive of the Watchers.
But do you think they know that those children aren't going to be normal?
Yes, and that goes to this third motive, which is take wives from among the daughters of men, produce children, families, and then this is the unspoken motive, create dynasties and dominate the earth through their offspring. So they had to legally, this had to be a legal transaction with the children of men. And when they made that transaction, obviously it was a Faustian bargain, but it was legal, it was authorized by the governors of planet Earth, namely the offspring of Adam and Eve. And they struck a bargain, clearly in the book of Enoch. They because it's not one-sided, the Watchers get to marry the maidens that they chose, but in exchange, they gave knowledge to men. So there's a bargain that took place there. And then the ultimate goal of the Watchers, which is played out in what they actually do, is to dominate the earth. They set up these dynasties, and their offspring can rule the earth because they're human enough to inherit the birthright of Adam, which is dominion of planet Earth. But the Watchers themselves have their governance of the earth is through their offspring, through their human hybrid offspring. So they're trying to play a legal game here. They know what they're about to do is a transgression, but they're trying to have it authorized by
because they swear an oath, right? And then they kind of collectively know, if we do this, we got to do this together because we're kind of screwed.
That's right. Yeah.
So here, two questions at that. Outside of Enoch, what do you think are two other your favorite sources to prove the giants were a thing? The reliability on the giant theory.
There's a lot. I mean, there's every single culture has every ancient culture that I've ever encountered has legends of giants.
Yeah.
And most of them are ancient, but if you want to get close to giant lore, America and Sardinia are the two places. And then you can go to places like Solomon Islands where they say they're still alive, in Afghanistan.
What about ancient sources like texts?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of them. Plutarch, who's a Greek historian, he wrote some histories regarding Rome, and he writes about General Sertorius, who, when he was in North Africa, in Tingis, which is on the North African coast, close to where modern-day Tangier is located today. He was with his legion. They opened up the tomb of a giant because the Phoenicians were worshiping this giant, this dead giant. Again, the Canaanites had a cult of giant worship, and the Phoenicians were the Canaanites, and were descendants of the Canaanites. And so Sertorius, this Roman general, he probably in disbelief, like there's no way there's a gigantic being there. He has his men open the tomb. And to his utter surprise, he finds a massive giant dead. And he has his men seal up the tomb, and then he pays respect to the giant.
His writings.
This is in Plutarch. And you can find this woven throughout different histories. That's a part of the history of Rome. But if you go over to South America, you can look at the history of the Inca Empire, the conquest of the Inca Empire, and find dozens of accounts that relate to giants.
Well, that's kind of leads into my second question about this topic. Is I think I know the answer to this, but what megalithic site do you think best demonstrates engineering intent beyond sort of the bronze, Stone Age tech that could prove that giants were building some of these things?
Engineering directly related to giants, there's no way to know. The only indication that you would have that giants built this is if the dimensions are large enough, if the proportions are large enough to accommodate giants.
Yeah.
If you are looking at a megalithic edifice or complex, and the doorways are not large enough to accommodate 8, 9, 10 foot tall people, then you're not looking at an edifice that was at least made for giants, maybe made by giants, but that doesn't make any sense. And the giants were slaves, and I doubt that was the case. So,
or their tech, the tech that was,
but even still
preserved.
You and I would never build a home that was not correct in regard, proportionally correct to our stature. So, one place that I would say, and you were there, you and Luke were there with me, is in Cusco at Sacsayhuaman. Remember the doorways? We have a picture of the three of us standing in the doorway. Now that doorway probably is what, 10 foot tall?
Yeah, it was big. I mean, we're standing in the doorway, three of us.
All three of us.
Yeah.
Standing shoulder to shoulder.
It feels like you could put another group of us above us.
So there's a doorway, and not only the doorway, but the stairwell.
Yep.
At Sacsayhuaman. If you were to build those stairs for a person that fit through that doorway, you would have created them with the same distance that they are today for someone who has a very long gait, a long walker, which is sometimes what giants.
Do you believe at the height of that empire, there was a watcher there? There was like human slaves, and there were giants kind of serving the watcher.
The watchers would have been gods living among men.
Yeah,
and their offspring would have been the great kings, the giants. I mean, this is This is.
But is that like the foundation of maybe a megalithic Tower of Babel, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that
it has like a star shape. I remember looking at it.
And there's no way to know what the purpose precisely of Sacsayhuaman was.
Yeah.
Could have been a fortress. It could have been a fortress. Could have been a temple. It could have been an astronomical thing.
Yeah.
Could have been a technological thing. Nobody really knows.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder if the Watchers are living on Earth, and they were. Where were they living? Like, where were they living with these wives of theirs? Were they just living in the huts and in the simple homes, or did they have temples built for themselves? Did they have magnificent palaces built for themselves? Were they living like living, breathing gods on Earth? That's really the picture that the Book of Enoch paints. These are essentially gods co-inhabiting with mankind, which is exactly what the ancients said. This is Eptepi to the ancient Egyptians, when the gods dwelt among men and copulated with human women, and then their offspring ruled their empires.
Do you think that's why we see similar architecture, megalithic architecture around the world, not connected?
Some of my colleagues believe that like all of these megaliths are architecture of, fallen angels.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced of that. I don't have any proof that that's the case. Human beings were extraordinary. Just regular old homegrown human beings were extraordinary. The first generation humans were much more remarkable than us in every way, physically more robust and intellectually much more capable than we are. And there's a possibility that antediluvians were much taller than us, 7, 8, 9 feet tall, just regular antediluvian people. Yeah. That's also a possibility. So if you're dealing with people who are much more physically robust and far more intelligent than us because they're closer to the source, right? Adam was like the prototypical human. Imagine a human being with not a single flaw in his genome, not a single flaw. He's firing on all cylinders. Every neuron is 100% activated.
Yeah.
Every fiber of his body, no genetic deformities or maladies, mutations. What would that human being be like? What would he be capable of? Especially one who interfaced with God and with his elder siblings, I believe. So the first generation humans were exceedingly intelligent. So they need to be in the picture. When we talk about megalith builders, it's very possible that Adam, the line of Seth, or the line of Cain in the antediluvian world were capable of building megaliths and were just far more intelligent than us. They were much longer lived. So I think
what was the technology then you think that they had that we didn't have that made us make the bargain, the deal?
Oh, the Watchers?
Yeah.
So if that's a good question.
We traded that tech, but because I think we had the ability, we just didn't have the coding. We didn't have the language. We didn't have the knowledge, but I think we had a better brain to handle the code.
Maybe it was literal technology, not just knowledge. What if they handed them some devices?
Yeah.
Like, here, cut stone with this, right?
Yeah.
So that's possible. That is within the realm of possibility. There's no question.
So more like Legend of Zelda.
Yeah. It's exactly like Legend of Zelda.
You just crack open the cave and I just hear the golden flute.
Exactly. So you wonder.
Yeah.
Because,
I think they were smarter, but they were still naive in some ways. They knew they didn't know something, but they didn't exactly know the formula how to put it all together. Because
the Watchers knew that what they were giving to mankind, whatever it was, knowledge and technology, was going to corrupt them.
Because when we were in the Coricancha, which is, right, I'm saying that right?
Coricancha.
When you were kind of describing this, you were saying this is like megalithic technology where those blocks were super smooth. almost stacked together, but they were still kind of like almost melted together. You were kind of describing, I remember on our trip that we did with some of our listeners, this could be like second generation megalithic technology. It's not quite as big and crazy as what we saw up on the mountain. This is more like a smaller version of that.
Well, we know it's at least
like
second generation because the foundations are green diorite.
Yeah.
And the edifice sitting on that foundation is andesite.
Yeah.
So those are two different stones. And the diorite's large, huge megalithic stone. So somebody was occupying. There was some megalithic edifice there before the one that you see today. The one we see today is still, it's exquisite. The masonry is exquisite. But there's a chance that the Inca did build that one because the Inca were incredible masons. So they were capable of building some beautiful buildings, the interlocking andesite blocks.
Yeah.
So there's a chance, and in my mind, I'm not sure if the Inca built Coricancha or if they found Coricancha and they reinforced it and they repaired it. I think it's a 50-50 on the Coricancha. I don't believe they built the foundations of Coricancha. They found the megalithic foundations, or they somehow knew
and
that
then they built on top.
This was a sacred spot. This was sacred and important to the gods, who they believed were their fathers.
And for like listeners who haven't been there specifically, basically this is like in the church, right? These look more like Legos kind of stacked together. They're still megalithic and they're still perfect and smooth and round a little bit.
Cyclopean, yeah.
But then you go up on the hill and the megaliths, the stones look like basically giant pieces of like almost the way corn is kind of grown together. Yeah. It's totally two different building styles.
Yeah, those are limestone up there and Coricancha's andesite, and andesite is harder.
Yeah.
So it's a harder stone.
But then up the road in downtown Cusco, you see sort of a middle version of that. You know, it's kind of, they're not as big as they are.
This is my thought.
Yeah.
So if you and I are conquistadors.
Yes.
And we arrive to Cusco, we conquer the Inca. We see the edifices in Cusco. And they remarked about them. They write about them. The conquistadors. They write about the walls of Sacsayhuaman. They say about the walls of Sacsayhuaman that men could not have built this. These had to have been built by giants or demons. That's what they say.
Yeah.
You would think that when we were going to go build our cathedrals, because there's dozens of cathedrals in Cusco, wouldn't we go have a little discussion with the architects of the Inca? Because it's superior stonework. Yeah. There's nothing like it anywhere in Europe. Wouldn't you say, as an architect, wouldn't you be curious about how they did that? Wouldn't you want to learn that style? And wouldn't you build your cathedrals like the megalith? Those would be the greatest cathedrals in the world.
Yeah.
And they're anti-seismic. The megaliths are anti-seismic, and there's a lot of earthquakes there. So the fact that the Spanish never learned how to build any of that, including the masonry at Coricancha, and the masonry at Coricancha is manageable. It's large stones, but they're not huge. You can manage those stones. So why didn't they build at least the foundations of their cathedral like that? And there's only two options. A, because this was a secret among the Inca, and the priest class who kept it didn't reveal the secret. Or B, because they didn't know how to do it, because they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Those are the only two options. So,
well, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago, like kind of the human's capability of building this. How much knowledge do we have? The prototype of Adam. Yeah, he's smart. To me, it's like a MacBook, though, with no software. It's like, is it the best system to run, like, with knowledge once you put it in there? But we still didn't have the code, I don't think. We didn't know. You think Adam knew how to build megalithic, like take stones and shape them? Because they look like they're heated, cooled, lit.
Why wouldn't he?
I mean, I don't know. It just seems like he didn't need to. He would, maybe he had the ability to do it, but it seems like it's a technology where there's like a frequency. They have a couple problems. They have to shape the things, and they're in odd shapes, and then they have to move them somehow, and they have to quarry them. So
it's possible that Diluvian civilization was much more advanced than we are accustomed to conceiving of. As I said, the first generation humans, who knows what they were capable of? They might have been doing things that were already really advanced before the Watchers showed up.
Yeah.
And then the Watchers show up, and they take the their civilization and they level it up with, I mean, how else can we describe it except for extraterrestrial technology?
Yeah.
And it gets leveled up. Now, does that mean that human beings were building megaliths? No, it just means that they could have been. We don't know. We don't know.
They're probably taught, if anything.
We have no idea what they were capable of. We just don't know. I mean, I always wonder if original human beings had elongated skulls, because the elongated skulls, like in Paracas and other parts of the world, they have more cranial mass. Their brains are bigger. So it's all bets are off. When you talk about going back to the original man, we don't know what that original schematic was. We are so degenerated from Adam that we're probably, I would say, almost definitely smaller than they were. And we might be, like I said, it would not surprise me if first generation humans were 9-10 feet tall. Would not surprise me at all. Wouldn't surprise me if they had elongated skulls and larger cranial mass.
David rolls around. I mean, obviously David is much smaller than Goliath, so we know, like,
those are post-human.
Yeah.
That's post-flood humans. Remember, there was a point at which human beings are living hundreds of years old, and then suddenly God cuts it off, and it's 120 years, and then that gets cut down to 80 or 75. So long lifespans, superior biology. You have to, okay, let's just ask a very simple question. How much better is your biology? How much better does it have to be? How much more efficient does it have to be for you to live 900 years? I mean, you're talking about, if you take us today and you put us next to the antediluvian humans, our biology sucks. They're living hundreds of years.
Yeah.
That tells you that there's something going on, that they were extraordinary, physiologically speaking, extraordinary. They're still humans. They're more human than we are. I don't think that we processed very well what we've actually lost in regard to,
at least
to what we were.
Times better. I mean, it would make sense. I mean, I think that
900 years old.
Yeah, but a lot of people think that's because that was the curse put on. There's all these, the fall, bodies get to age quickly, age faster. There's all these.
Well, no, they were laboring under the curse. The curse started as soon as Adam was evicted from Eden.
Yeah.
So they were laboring under the curse and the futility. The curse was futility.
Yeah.
And obviously they were dying because they were exiled from Eden. They no longer had access to that, whatever it was, that life-giving force. I don't think it was an apple or a piece of fruit in Eden. And as soon as they're divorced from that, they begin to succumb to entropy. So, and this is part of the wages of sin or death. So entropy is at work in their bodies. They're still living hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
But they're ultimately going to die. So that tells you, and it's the same force of entropy at work in our bodies. So that tells you right there how much more superior their biology was than ours.
Do you think AI and the future tech is going to hack that and keep humans alive?
Well, that's the idea. The whole idea, and this is subconscious, of course. And I write about this in my book, Birthright. The subconscious longing of the human species is to return to Adam and ultimately to Eden.
Yeah.
But Jesus says, I am the door.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who tries to come in another way is a thief and a robber.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what transhumanists are. They're thieves and robbers. They're trying to attain eternal life, but by circumventing the cross of Christ and scaling the wall to paradise rather than entering through the door. And so it is precisely the goal of transhumanism, is to regain what was lost in Eden, but not through Christ, to circumvent the cross of Christ. And this is precisely what I think that the bargain today is these technologies. Mm-hmm. The bargain is going to be, we can upgrade our biology.
Yeah.
We can live longer. We're going to have life extension. We can eliminate a lot of the genetic diseases.
Yeah.
I mean, heart disease, we can eliminate a lot of that. But at what cost? We have to trade our humanity. We have to give away the trademarks that make us human. That's the bargain.
All right, transitioning to modern times, high strangeness. How do you think the Genesis 6 narrative, because we've been talking about ancient tech, we've been talking about ancient prototype of humans, megalithic building, technologies. How does that relate to UFOs, UAPs now? Which is why I think we talk a lot about this Gen 6 stuff, because you can't interpret modern stuff if you don't have sort of a framework of which it's happening, right? How do they relate?
I would say that the same kind of beings that were involved in the Genesis 6 affair are in play as it pertains to the UFO phenomenon today. However, not exclusively them.
Yes.
It's highly complex. There's no simple answer. So a lot of Christians want this to be really simple. They want to say, oh, fallen angels, demons, or fallen angels, Nephilim, and demons. That explains everything that's happening. That's inadequate. That's not the explanation. When you say fallen angels, when people talk about fallen angels, we've sort of we've simplified these terms, and I think we've stripped some of the meaning away from them. I think the general conception of a quote unquote fallen angel, and I say quote unquote because it's not a biblical term. Fallen angel is not a biblical term.
Sure.
It's a contrivance. It's a term that we use to describe something that we're reading about, right? What people think of are these very grotesque, demonic beings who are, they're supernatural in the sense that they're like, the only way that I can describe it, and this isn't my perspective, this is trying to illustrate other people's perspective. I would say the vast majority of Christians that I interface with have this perspective that I'm attempting to articulate here. So they view them as these grotesque, demonic genies, basically, who can metamorphosize into all different kinds of shapes and things. And this is actually a medieval view.
Sure.
This is not a biblical.
Is that because we only get so many terms in the Bible to give a definition to one of these creatures?
How can you paint a complicated portrait with 3 crayons, 3 colors? You can't.
Well, Paul seems to allude to multiple factions, almost like multiple governments of weird stuff.
That's right. So rather than
he doesn't even name a creature. He names like a system of creatures, almost, a principality. Could be anything.
Yes. Rather than thinking about fallen angels as these grotesque evil genies that can pretty much just blink in and out of our dimension or whatever, I think that's medieval.
Yeah.
I think we would do well to set that aside and instead start to formulate a new conception in which these beings, these fallen angels, who are properly understood as insubordinate sons of God. These are insurrectionary sons of God.
Yeah.
And they come from a civilization, very, very ancient civilization that pre-exists our own. In fact, our civilization is modeled on theirs. And these beings are exceedingly old and wise and are in possession of advanced technology, much more advanced than anything we have. And they've been interacting with the earth since the beginning. They've been interacting with mankind. And this is all, by the way, everything I'm saying right now is framed within the biblical context.
Sure.
Nothing I'm saying is not biblical right now. So all of this is a biblical perspective, and the evil genie thing is not a biblical perspective. So these...
You mean aliens?
Well, I'm building up to that.
Okay.
So quote unquote fallen angels. And let's take away the word
Brandon is heavenly hunks.
Yes. Let's take away the word fallen. Let's set that aside. Let's just talk about angels. You're talking about a civilization. You're talking about, and I'm going to use this term and people get upset. It doesn't matter.
But you're talking about watchers specifically.
I'm talking about just any
fallen angels,
any angelic being. Okay. That is, these are beings
that has like left heaven.
These beings are essentially extraterrestrial beings. They do not come from the earth. They were not born here. Yeah. Their provenance is not planet Earth. They come from somewhere else. And this is evident in the biblical narrative. They're not from here. So it doesn't matter where they're from, by the way. It doesn't matter if they're from another dimension or if they're some kind of a parallel universe.
But what I'm asking is, like, if a Christian says they're fallen angels, there's a couple verses that describe fallen angels, but are they talking just specifically about watchers? These one angels with this one job?
Well, there
could be 100 classes of angels.
There's really, to my knowledge, no verses that describe specifically fallen angels, just angels. And remember,
angels that sinned in Jude, I guess.
We have to remember that the word angel is a descriptor.
Sure.
It's a description of occupation, not a classification of kind. In other words, there is no creature that is an angel by nature. Angel is what it does, not what it is.
Yeah.
So that's an occupational descriptor. So these beings, these quote unquote fallen angels and non-fallen angels, the good guys and the bad guys, they come from an ancient extraterrestrial civilization somewhere else in the universe.
Yeah.
Now, again, people are going to quibble with that because they're going to say, no, they're extra dimensional. They come from a different dimension.
No, they come from inside the earth is what a lot of people say.
Well, angels are
already here.
Well, angels are not from the earth. That's clear in the Bible.
Yeah.
They're not from here. They pre-exist mankind, and the morning stars sang together. The sons of God shouted for joy when the foundations of the earth were being laid.
Yeah.
So they're not here. They are extraterrestrial. So why do we have to go there first? Well, if you're gonna couch this into a biblical conversation, you have to start there, because right out of the gates, right at the very beginning, we are encountering, in the biblical framework, extraterrestrial beings. We're encountering them right in the beginning of the story. So we have an extraterrestrial perspective that is not read into the Bible. It's not extra biblical. It's not bad hermeneutics. It is simply part of the narrative. People in the comment section are going to say they're not extraterrestrial, they're interdimensional. Yeah. It doesn't matter. This is semantics.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what interdimensional means. It doesn't mean anything. No one's seen an interdimensional world. Our brains cannot even conceptualize more than 3 dimensions. It's impossible. We cannot conceptualize a hypercube, a tesseract.
Yeah.
We don't. We have no idea what a tesseract looks like because we can't think in 4 dimensions. So formulating theology in 4 dimensions is an exercise in futility. I think if we simplify this and we understand that there is a extraterrestrial civilization that pre-exists our own, and that is a biblical paradigm, that is a correct biblical framework, theological framework, and we start from there, then we can work our way into the UFO phenomena.
Okay.
And begin to understand some of it from a biblical perspective.
And if you're saying a civilization, then obviously we know how many different species there are here. Who knows how many species there are there, which makes it more complex.
Very complex.
And you've been doing this a long time. You've been doing this over 20 years. And so you've had people chirping at you and giving you comments.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
And for 20 years. And it makes you frustrated because I think a lot of times our listeners are like, why does he go on? You know, we get a lot of emails. What is Tim going on about why is this such a big deal to him? Because I think you're trying to help Christians understand that just about anything could show up. I mean, if you listen to like some of the UFO reports, there's not just like one type of being that comes out of these. I mean, the Greys are reported a lot, but there's all different types of things that people are interacting with. And I think your passion is, correct me if I'm wrong, to help Christians realize that you might need a book this big to kind of define the creatures that exist.
I think we need to put our big boy pants on.
Yeah.
And graduate from the medieval worldview.
So the reason I asked this question with the UFO and the disclosure and how it relates to Genesis 6 is that we actually put some UFO imagery in our book of Enoch. Maybe tell some of our listeners where they can get our version of the book of Enoch.
Yeah, we have collaborated on a book of Enoch. This is our own edition of the book of Enoch. It's R.H. Charles, but we have commentary and an introduction, and we have concept art in our edition that is going to illustrate some of our very unique perspectives on the book of Enoch. There's no other book of Enoch like this out there. If you want a copy of our book of Enoch, you can go to
blurryenoch.com. And I don't know, we spent about 6 months making this. It wasn't like we just taken a PDF, copied it, and threw it back out there. We meticulously you went through like 3 different versions.
I did, yeah.
We made sure there was no errors, and we formulated it actually differently so you can actually follow along pretty well. Put art in there, did a generous commentary in the beginning, and really kind of, if you've been on this blurry journey since the beginning, and you kind of know have the framework of all the weirdness that's going on, this is your version, this is your copy.
And it includes 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Enoch.
Yeah.
So it's the complete edition.
Yeah.
And it is also volume 1 in the Nephilim series. So we've got more volumes coming in this series. So track with us, track with Blurry Creatures, track with me, and you will be seeing information coming out of the next installment in the Nephilim series.
Easiest way to get it, blurryenoch.com, or go to Amazon, put Alberino, Book of Enoch, Blurry, Book of Enoch. You'll find it, and you'll see the cover. See Enoch writing the old book on the cover. So check it out. Thanks for tuning in this episode.
A lot of the way that we think as Western Christians comes from the medieval times.
Totally.
We think it's biblical, but it's not. It's traditional. And those are two very different things. And that's not to say, by the way, because you can go back, correct biblical perspective is that of the ancient Near East, right? That's the context of the Bible, the ancient Near East, the Old Testament for sure. But they didn't necessarily have the correct perspective either because they had limited knowledge.
But they had better terms for some of these things. Like I said the other day in an interview, it was like, we were on the Ken Coleman show and I was talking to him and it's like, what is a demon? I asked him what a demon is. He didn't really know. I'm like, because they always say, every interviewer is like, this is demon, this is demonic activity.
That's right.
Everything from Bigfoot to UFO encounters, it's all demonic activity. I'm like, what is a demon?
That you have to do, if you're going to use that word and use it as liberally as most Christians do, it's the proverbial broad brush, right?
And I said, it's a bastard spirit.
It's exactly what it is.
And I said, what does that mean to you?
Disembodied bastard spirit.
Yeah. It's a spirit. So it doesn't have a body anymore.
Yep.
And it's giving you some origin of its nature, where it came from, what its parents were. And I think that is, like, Heiser posted something recently, or his channel did, but he said something.
It'd be remarkable if.
Yeah, he did, right?
The ghost of Mike.
The ghost of Mike, which is so meta here for what we're talking about. But he said angels is like an old quote he had that was just regurgitated on his channels. Angels and demons are generic terms.
They are generic terms.
That's it.
They're very generic terms.
But that's what Christians will respond every single time with.
Right. And you're right. When someone uses the term demon in this broad way that so many Christians do today, it's correct to make them define the term. Yeah. Because if they don't define the term, then it's fantasy. It's Fantasyland.
Yeah.
It's Chronicles of Narnia. It's not any sort of biblical reality. Yeah. And it doesn't conform to actual reality that we see today either. What we do is we conflate the word demon with the concept of demonic.
Sure.
That's it. We conflate those two things.
And we should just use the word like evil or...
Demonic is a completely different... Yeah. Demonic isn't a creature.
Yeah.
Demonic is an attitude. It's an action. It's a mode of being.
Yeah.
And you can have things out there that are highly demonic in the sense that they're evil, but aren't classical biblical demons.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is we have a terminology problem. But to answer your question before we go into the members only section, but to answer the question of how do you have, because there's no short answer to how is this, how can you frame the UFO stuff into a biblical context? Well, if you ask the vast majority of theologians, I'm not even just talking about lay Christians, theologians today, and it doesn't matter if they're Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, doesn't matter. The vast majority, 99.9% of them, will say it's angels and demons.
Yeah.
And Nephilim. Some will throw in the word Nephilim, as if that's the perspective. That's the only biblical perspective. But I just laid out the beginning, a foundation for something completely different.
Yeah.
Which is right from the beginning, we're dealing with an extraterrestrial civilization existent in some other part of the universe, right? Right there. That foundation, which is, again, a biblical foundation, that opens the gates for all kinds of possibilities. Yeah. One of which you mentioned, there could be all kinds of creatures and beings out there that we have no idea exist. And you know what? God doesn't have to tell us about them. He's not obligated to tell us everything about the universe or all of the beings in it. That's not the purpose of the Bible. The Bible does not inform us about anything and everything.
Yeah.
The Bible has a very specific purpose. Yeah. The most important and specific purpose of the Bible is to convey the gospel of Christ.
Sure.
It's not the only thing that the Bible does, but it's the primary purpose of the scripture.
Well, it's the story how it weaves in and out, and it seems the gospel of Christ kind of weaves into a lot of these stories. And I think this is the impetus of Blurry Creatures. It was about 10 years of me studying all these topics and realizing that Christians kind of ran into a wall.
Yeah. We got 3 crayons.
Yeah.
Then we're supposed to draw or color or paint this elaborate, intricate picture of what's going on with 3 colors.
But I would say also all the Bigfoot researchers, all the haunting ghost guys, all the ancient aliens guys, they were running into walls too. They had gone further, but they weren't plugging in the biblical narrative. They were afraid of the biblical narrative.
Yeah.
That means there's implications. There's theological implications for their salvation and other things. They almost want to like play with magic, say magic exists, but we don't really know the origin of all these things. And so, which kind of brings me to my last question before we hop into the members only section is like, what modern case, because you and I get a lot of emails, a lot of bizarre stuff gets sent to us. What modern case, could be anything, Bigfoot, Dogman, UFOs, hybrids, abductions, most clearly mirrors the Genesis 6 template?
Modern.
Yeah. If it's like a modern kind of version of Genesis 6 like happening.
Well, mirrors is a difficult one because I don't know of any case where you have watchers copulating with human women. Women, and I would say
hybrid.
That's easy for me.
Okay.
Kandahar Giant.
Okay.
The Kandahar Giant.
I thought you were going to go alien abductions.
No.
That. Okay.
No. I wouldn't say that. I would say the Kandahar Giant.
All right.
That, because there you're dealing with, for sure, you're dealing with a descendant of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And it's not just one. If you want more on that, you're going to have to join us in the members portion of this discussion.
That's right. And we've done a lot of these discussions over the years, and appreciate you, Tim, for doing this. And we set up this like cool fire here and talked about a lot of things. And I'm sure we have more events planned in the future. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff, and we've done 3 or 4 trips already. And I know we want to get to Sardinia at some point and really look at some of these giant tombs, but if you want to check out some of our members content, ours is blurrycreatures.com/members, and
mine is the AlberinoAnalysis.com. And yeah, track with us, track with Blurry Creatures, track with my stuff if you're interested in joining us on some of these future endeavors. We have some cool ones planned.
Yeah.
There's some talk of Sardinia.
That's right.
There's some talk of Malta.
I'm trying to get him to go to Hawaii because there's some blurriness in Hawaii. That happened next year.
Well, you wouldn't have to convince me too much to go with Hawaii.
Well, we just got the invite a couple weeks ago, and so I was trying to make that happen. But thanks for joining us for the discussion. We're going to probably go another 10 questions or so and keep this rolling.
So if you guys want to see the rest of this interview, this is not an interview, this discussion, then go over to Blurry Creatures, join their members community, blurrycreatures.com/members, or go over to the AlberinoAnalysis.com. Both of our members' sites are going to feature the rest of this conversation.
All right.